Okay, welcome back. This is part two of our lecture on artist books and process books, the first lecture for the junior seminar class, spring of 21. When we last left off, we were talking about Lucas Samaras. This book, actually, the last time I was in New York City with one of the artists, the school trips, they had this piece out at the Modern. And Lucas Samaras is one of those artists that um, I'm I'm very ambivalent about. Some of his pieces I'm confused by and dislike, but some of his pieces amaze me. He was an amazing mind, like a mad, like a mad genius. And then lastly, in terms of contemporary artists who just do amazing sculptural works with books, you have someone like Anselm Kiefer. Now, as a model for a young student, I don't know what you could do with this because none of these are functional books. They're all so big that um, and they're all so heavy that no one could ever actually use them as a book. But I think still it's important to note that here's an artist who loves the imagery of a book, the metaphor and the physicality of a book, even though he makes them out of materials like concrete, so that they are just these massive and sheets of lead and sheets of glass. Um, but uh, but they are books nonetheless. I remember when I was a high school student, I went to see an Anselm Kiefer show, and back then he made some books that were much more in the normal size, like large coffee table book, or maybe slightly larger than that size. Um, and they had these Anselm Kiefer books in glass cases, and you could on the hour, every hour, the curators would come wearing gloves and they would turn one page. And I remember going to that show and being really anxious about wanting to be there at that moment to see them turn the page. Because sometimes, when they turn a page, parts of the page would break off. That was always a thrill. And so the last, in terms of contemporary artists that I want to talk about, is I want to talk about this kind of very recent trend in modified found books, where artists, a number of young artists, are finding books, like just basically like going to a thrift store and finding interesting books and turning these books into works of sculpture by the way that they address them and modify them. Those of you who were in last fall's 3D design class will have some experience with this because you guys all made your own modified book sculpture. And so we have all kinds of different examples of this, and some who really kind of make these things quite solid. Jennifer Sale works with, she works with like, wax and other kind of resin sort of materials to kind of glue pages and paste things together to make them very solid. Um, you'll notice a lot of these artists play with the found imagery in the book and try to reveal that. And of course, the godfather of this movement is Brian Detmer, who is an amazing artist, and he uses found object books, and by the way he cuts them, he brings all these different layers together so that so the illustrations from all these different levels function together as one whole piece. And so that, I think, in terms of your artist book, that's definitely something that you could think about. Not necessarily making that the whole point of the piece, but definitely thinking about ways that you can cut into pages so that they reveal other things at other levels. So here are some examples of student artist books, and then we'll also talk about student process books. This first book that we're looking at is a book by Bobby Anthony called But Sometimes. And it was a handmade, hand sewn together binding um, book, but he also did a more traditional kind of student artist book where he used a found object book. He did this in Painting 2 for me. And you can see, and this particular one I think was, it was I can't remember, but the content was very relevant. He very much wanted to interact with the ideas contained in the book. And here are some examples from junior seminar artists who used the artist book slash process book as really a chance to use it as a process book, where these are, for this particular, this is Ariel's book, and she used it as very much a character development type process book. And some are much more just like going in kind of interesting individual ways. This is a very common strategy, like um, dealing with the text, pulling out content from the text, but also obliterating other parts of the text. This one I think actually is also from Painting 2. And here are some more examples from Junior Seminar. This is Ren's. I can't remember whether this is from Junior Seminar or from Painting. Um, this is Josh Edgar's. Josh was a ceramicist, but he made a beautiful artist book where it was just full of these really lovely drawings of ideas for ceramics, some that he did make and some that he didn't. It was just a really nice artist book altogether. Um, and here's some more pages of just various different student artist books. And you can see almost anything is acceptable. Using it to collect sources, collect imagery, tape and paste things in, using it as a journal, using it for research. There is no, wrong answer. And here's an example. This is Casey Mann's very final books that she made, where she was making lots of artist books, and she got really excited about the idea of working on some of them so that she could turn them into actual sculptural objects that would be showable in a gallery space. And she combined drawing and painting and screen printing, as well as a little bit of relief, but mostly screen printing on a lot of these. And so my final thing, and I'll have just enough time to talk about it, is talking about process books in design. And I really just want to, we've already talked about process books in general, but I want to emphasize that process books are a really important part of design, especially of graphic designers. But there's two main things that sometimes people talk about. One of them is this kind of process book, sort of a printed book that represents the process of how your ideas developed. Many times in art school, let's say at a graphic design 2 level, students will make something like this, a printed book that will be a representation of all their ideas for a series of projects, and it will represent the finished ideas of the projects, but also all the ideas that went into it and how that developed. But then the more traditional idea of a process book is just this. It's like a small sketchbook, or often a grid-lined book that an artist used to kind of develop their ideas per assignment, like just working on, basic kind of type ideas, or working on basic, logo ideas over and over again, coming up with lots of examples to really kind of figure out where you want to go. We're going to talk more about examples of this as we get into the process part of these lectures, but I wanted to show these mostly so that students who are graphic designers don't feel like that what they need to do for their artist/process book is do something very different from what they normally do. Their artist/process book can be as much as it always was a reflection of them being graphic designers. It just needs to have more of it. And I want everyone, well, in this case, Professor Dickey will want everyone to just pour themselves into these books. I want to see as much as possible from you guys. And so my final page is this page, and I thought this was a really kind of interesting combination because this is two types of artist books combined. What we have here is an artist book that is a compendium of all the artist books of Art Ruscha. So in this one book, it has the imagery and ideas and some text from almost all of the, if we go all the way back to Ed Ruscha, whoop, right there, like all of these books up here, right? It is one book that covers in small amount all of those books, but then another artist has come in and done the book modifying thing, like what Brian Detmer does, and turned it into this kind of topographical map, which I think is just beautiful and amazing. So I think it's a great image to end on. All right, that's it. That's the end of the first